In this problem, we're going to look at 88 test scores and try to make a histogram out of them. Now, the problem in the book describes 88 English scores, but we're going to transform this a little bit and say that these are 88 scores that people have received, that job applicants have received on their cover letters. So they've been graded for English and things like that, and that gives us a little information about job candidates that we can use in hiring decisions. So we have a table here. We're given these 88 scores, and we're going to do parts A, B, C, and D of this problem. So A and B are just making frequency distributions. Now, the part A, let's label that up here. A, we want a frequency distribution with a bin width equals 1. So that means just putting them basically in groups of not really grouping them much at all. So we go into the table, we go to, and we want to create a pivot table that will put this into a frequency distribution. Go to Insert and go to Pivot Table, and we want to select the location for our pivot table first. So we're going to put in this existing worksheet. That means on the same tab. We're not going to put it on a different tab. And then I click in Location, and I'm going to put it right here in N4. So I clicked on N4, and that's where it will start. I click OK, and now we have the pivot table fields information comes up, and the only option there is scores. I click that, and I can drag that down to rows because we want each score to be in a row. And now the value that we want in that other column is not the sum of the scores. We need to change that. So I click that down arrow, and then I have to click Value Field Settings. That's not an obvious choice. That's what it is. And now we can change from sum to count, and I can press OK. And we basically have a frequency distribution with all the different numbers. Now we're going to improve this a little bit. Notice how it has 45, 49, 55. It doesn't have all the numbers. Let's fix that by let's group these. So I clicked in here, and now I'm going to click on group. Now if you're in Mac, I think you have to select the top row and go all the way down to all the rows except grand total, and then you can right click, and it's going to ask for pivot table options. Now if you're in PC, you don't have to select that. You can just be any place in the pivot table there. And we are going to for empty values show 0. We can do that. And then we also want to group. So I guess for PCs you can't select everything, but for Mac you do select everything. You just choose one row in PC. You go to group, and then it says starting at 45, ending at 98 by 10. No, we don't want to group it by 10. We just want to group it by 1. So I'm going to change that by 1. Click OK. And now we have 45, 49, 55. We've got a set for each of them. We still want to tweak this because there's no 46, 47. So I'm going to go to, I right-clicked on one of the cells. I'm going to go to Field Setting. And I want to go to Layout and Print. And there's an option here that shows show items with no data. I clicked on that, clicked OK, and now we've got all of our items here. We've got one for 45, 46, and it shows which ones don't have any zeros in it. Now it's interesting, we've got a top one for less than 45 and a bottom one for greater than 98. That's just a little strange. Suppose I don't want those. What I can do is I can go down here to this filter and sort button, and I'm going to go down here to the filters, and I'm going to say I don't care about this less than 45. So I'm going to click off of that. And I don't care about this greater than 98 because I know we don't have any, and I press OK. And now we have a frequency distribution going all the way from 45 to 97 to 98, and it tells us how many people got each one of those scores. Now this is a little difficult to read, so we want to go to part B where it says let's make fewer bins. Now it suggests 15 bins. I'm going to suggest let's do a frequency distribution with bin width equals 5. I think that will be a more logical way of doing it. Now, so what we want to do is we want to make a second pivot table. Now, before we do that, sometimes in working in pivot tables, if you have more than one pivot table, they can interfere with each other. So I want to show you a trick how to get this pivot table to no longer be a pivot table. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that first one, and I'm going to do shift arrows and shift arrow down to select this entire table. Then I'm going to do Control C for copy. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it from a pivot table to just a set of data. I'm going to make it into a regular table eventually. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to paste values. That'll take all the formatting out and paste values. So make sure you're at home, go to paste, and there should be an option to paste values. So I'm going to paste values there, and I have pasted values. And now we're going to put this into a table. Now, I don't need that. Let's press escape so it's no longer selected. I don't want that bottom row there because that's going to interfere a bit. So I'm going to select those two cells and delete it. Now I'm going to just click any cell there. I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to go to Insert Table. And my table has headers, and I do OK. And now we've got just a regular table with the frequency distribution of bin width 1. So now we can go over here and calculate the frequency distribution for bin width equals 5, and we'll use this one to make our frequency distribution. So let's go back to our original table. I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to insert a pivot table. I'm going to use this existing worksheet. Now this location I'm going to put over here in Q4. Click OK. And we do the same thing as before. We've only got scores. I'm going to put them on rows. And so the sum of the scores, I'm going to change this value field setting to count. I've got OK. And now let's close this so we can see the screen better. We have a count for the different numbers, but we want to group them. So I'm going to group 45 to 95. I'm going to group them by 5. And we don't need to end at 98 because it might go a little higher. I'm going to press OK. And now we've got a group there. Now, if you've had problems on this on Excel, remember to select everything except that final line. On the PC, you can just have it placed any place. Now, let's tweak this frequency distribution. So let's change this row labels. Let's change this to cover letter scores. And instead of count of scores, let's just change it to count. Now let's get our missing values in there. So I'm going to go to Field Settings, Layout and Print, and Show Items with No Data. I can press OK. And so now we've got the 50 to 54. We've got a row showing that it's not there. We've got this less than 45 and greater than 100. I don't want that, so I'm going to go to the filter, and I'm going to turn off that row. Whoops, no, I want to select all. I'm going to turn off less than 45, and greater than 100. Okay, now let's see if I can get a 0 to show up in that 1. I could probably type it in there, but I'm going to do it by pivot table options. And for empty cells, show 0. And there we have the frequency distribution for the different scores. And this is pretty good. It shows what we can see. The top scores are top 10 scores, got 90 and above. There were a few that were below 50. But let's change this to a histogram. And so again, if in PC you can just click any place in there. In a Mac you might want to select all of them, see if that helps. And I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to look at charts, and I want a bar chart. So I'm going to choose a 2D bar chart as the basis of our make this our histogram. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and now we need to tweak it. Now the first thing I can do is I can turn off these field buttons of count and scores. So I'm going to just click on field buttons, get rid of those, and I'm going to change the title. I'm going to change this to histogram of cover letter scores. Now for a histogram, the bars need to be touching each other. So I am going to, let's see if I double click on that. We've got, it says series overlap, gap width 219. I don't want any gap width, so I want to change that. Now let's see if I can, okay, so we've got that. Now let's get some, let's see. I'm going to click out of that. I'm going to click back on here till everything's selected. And now I'm on the series option. No, I want this paint bucket, and I want a border. I want a solid line, color black, and let's make it about 2 points, because that makes a let's go a little bit more, 2.25, and now I've got a solid line there. So this is starting to look pretty good. Let's this total there, that doesn't do anything. I'm going to select that and delete it. Now on the scales here, we need to add some text. Say what these texts are. Now let's see, how are we going to find this? Let's go to axis options, horizontal axis, text fill. I'm not finding it. Let's go over to add elements. Aha, chart elements. Add axis titles. We want that. Okay, now the axis title we want here. Let's delete what we have there. And this is going to be the count. And we put frequency, we could put number, something like that. And then down here, let's delete axis title. And this is going to be score. And that looks pretty good. And we might want to adjust it. We don't need it to be that big. Yeah, let's make it a little bit bigger so the numbers aren't so crunched together. And here we have a nice histogram of the cover letter. I think that looks pretty good. So let's call this part C, histogram. And now the next question is D. It's about the skew. Does this look skewed? Well, we could say, look, there's these extra negative scores. There's this gap, and then we got the extra negative score there. So it looks a little negative score, but at the same time, it doesn't taper off very quickly at the positive score. So we've got some extra positive scores there. And I'd say generally it's symmetrical. It might be positively or negatively skewed, but I can't really tell, so I'm going to say it's symmetrical. Okay, so now we've done the problem, but the big question is, what does this mean, and how could you use it if you want to use this information to make the best hire? Well, one way that you could do it is you say, whoa, that looks like you've got a group of people here that did really well. We could give them 1 point for uh, having a good cover letter, or maybe just note that they have a good cover letter. These people over here have a poor cover letter. You might want to immediately remove them, because why in the world are they sending you a poor cover letter? Unless, of course, it's a job that doesn't require reading or writing. But that's a way that we can interpret this chart, that there's a few really bad people, and here's the ones that are skilled in writing cover letters. And we could use this information to help make a more intelligent hiring decision. Now, from a Christian perspective, we've got to be careful when we look at people's scores. Even though these people are probably better at English, or maybe their cognitive ability is higher, and these people are weaker, we need to make sure that we don't judge individuals, their worth, based on things like cognitive ability or English skills or things like that, because from God's perspective, every single person has the exact same worth. It doesn't matter how intelligent they are. It doesn't matter how much they are like us or can communicate like we can. Everybody has the exact same worth. So this only gives information relative to a job position that hopefully is well defined in terms of what skills are necessary. It doesn't provide us information on the worth of an individual, which comes from being created in God's image, and especially by being redeemed through Jesus Christ.